Coming up on First at 4, nearly a year and a half after the July 2022 flood, communities are still working on recovery. How one area hopes a new building will expand its efforts. And the number of migrants crossing into the U.S. is vastly straining resources at the southern border and beyond. How cities are struggling to care for the folks coming to the U.S.
And some snow showers are possible as we end the work week. Those details coming up as Mountain News First at 4 starts right now.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News First at 4.
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Hensley. First at 4, internet and phone service could soon return for many folks here in Perry County. Police say they responded to a call near exit 56 just outside of Hazard this morning, where they say wire appeared to have been intentionally cut. Crews told a WYMT reporter that internet should be back on within the next few hours. I've heard it's already on in some places. Police say they do not have a lead on a suspect, but they are investigating. Officers are asking anyone that may have information about this to call them or message them via Facebook. The Hazard wastewater treatment plant is currently getting a major clean out. Earlier this month, City Manager Tony Eversole reported that the plant was experiencing a buildup of excess waste. Eversole says the buildup was due to a lack of maintenance on the plant during the last several years.
Instead of the conventional way of letting the drains in the floor separate the solids, we had to actually get equipment down in there, skid steers down in the basins, and they were loading the solids into a larger piece of equipment, and then it went to a truck.
Eversole says when the sewer plant is in optimal condition after a maintenance like this, the water that is released is cleaner than the river water. A Central Kentucky mayor has issued a state of emergency regarding their water situation. Stanford is asking folks to voluntarily conserve their water usage. The state of emergency was issued to make it easier to access resources. WYMT's Phil Pendleton spoke to the mayor and has more from Lincoln County.
Stanford's mayor says this has not been a problem that started overnight. He says actually it's been ongoing for months and it's been getting steadily worse. The main reservoir where the city gets its water from has not been full, all because he says this area has pretty much not received adequate rainfall. The lakes in Stanford are getting smaller, and that is a concern for a city that is growing and needs water for thousands of people and a number of businesses. Mayor Dalton Miller says there are 3 lakes the city draws water from, and all are dealing with the effects of a moderate drought that has been going on for 6 months or so. He's optimistic the rainfall will increase, but is calling for people to voluntarily conserve in the meantime. That includes not letting the water run while you brush your teeth, wearing clothes several days before you wash them, and then using a dishwasher instead of manually washing dishes. He also says check your home for leaks and be aware of other leaks near you.
Because we could lose thousands of gallons of water if it's a major leak before anybody can get there to repair it or before we can find it.
Stanford is not alone in this problem. There are other communities in this area experiencing the same thing, such as in nearby Liberty. City officials there say their lake has about 125 to 135 days of water left, and they say they are not quite ready to institute drastic measures just yet. In Lincoln County, Phil Pendleton, now back to you.
Stanford's water superintendent says if the situation becomes catastrophic, they can buy water from Danville, but it's complicated because the pressure is different. Knott County officials are still working to recover from flood damage in July 2022. The county fiscal court announced they have purchased a building in downtown Hyndman to have more space. The building is next to the Knott County Courthouse. As a result of the flood damaging several buildings in Hyndman, Knott County Judge Executive Jeff Dobson says several county employees have moved their materials into the courthouse.
You know, the senior center and some of these other offices here in town that was destroyed by the flood, it didn't affect just 1 or 2 of our employees. You're talking maybe 12 or 15 of our employees that lost an office and everything that they had.
Dobson says they bought the building for $200,000. We'll have more on how they were able to acquire it and how it will be used coming up at 6.
We are tracking some dry and cool weather across the mountains on this Thursday afternoon. Let's take a live look from the Cumberland Valley. At the London Corbin Airport, we are cloudy, and the current temperature is below average on this Thursday at 40 degrees. Most of us right now in the middle to lower 40s, down to 41 for Jackson, also Somerset, 42 in Manchester, 44 over in Pikeville at this hour. So we are cooler on this Thursday, but up on the radar, we are dry under a cloudy sky. But notice as we zoom out, we are tracking a strong upper level low close to the Great Lakes, and all that moisture over Illinois, also Iowa and Missouri, that's pushing off to the south and southeast. So we are tracking some snow showers and some wintry mix potential as we go into your Friday, also to start the weekend. Now, the good news, temperatures will be above freezing in the middle to upper 30s, so we are not expecting those big impacts. However, some off and on snow showers are likely on Friday. Also on Saturday, watching out for possibly some areas of a light dusting in those grassy surfaces, also the elevated surfaces, mainly in those higher elevations, then trending better for New Year's Eve before possibly another weather system by New Year's Day. Tracking that busy forecast in just a few minutes. Steve?
Cameron, thank you. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the daughter at the center of an infamous Munchausen by proxy murder case, was released from prison this morning. The Missouri woman pleaded guilty in 2015 to second-degree murder to killing her mother, who forced her to pretend she was disabled. She was also forced to undergo unnecessary medical procedures as part of a fraud scheme. Blanchard testified that she convinced her boyfriend at the time, Nicholas Gojon, to stab her mother to death. Crews have started to demolish the house where 4 University of Idaho students were murdered. University President Scott Green has said that the off-campus rental in Moscow has been a grim reminder of the heinous act that took place there in November 2022. Green also has said the demolition will let the community begin to heal. The suspect, Brian Koberger, has denied any wrongdoing with not guilty pleas to first-degree murder charges entered on his behalf. Mexican immigration officials began clearing tents on the banks of the Rio Grande River as U.S. officials met with Mexico's president about the border crisis. Crossings have reached record levels. As CBS's Michael George explains, U.S. cities are struggling to manage the influx of people needing shelter and food.
As thousands of migrants trek northward, U.S. officials say they're working with Mexico to limit the number of people trying to cross the border. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas met with counterparts Wednesday in Mexico City. Afterwards, a U.S. official said progress is being made. The meetings come after more than 500,000 migrants crossed the dangerous Darien Gap jungle into Central America this year, double from last year, most fleeing crime, poverty, and conflict.
Pero queremos ayuda.
We want help, says this mother from Venezuela, and an education for our children. The U.S. Border Patrol says this month alone, officers on the southern border apprehended as many as 10,000 people a day. Border cities are bearing the brunt of the crisis, and Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been busing thousands to Democrat-led cities. Officials say more than 150,000 migrants have arrived in New York City this year. The city is housing and feeding about 70,000 at tent cities and hotels like this one in Midtown Manhattan.
The federal government must take responsibility and lead on this humanitarian crisis.
Wednesday, the mayors of New York, Chicago, and Denver met to discuss how to manage the crisis. New York City's mayor is now requiring bus companies give 32-hour notice before coming to the city and imposing limits on where and when migrants can be dropped off. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
The U.S. and Mexico released a joint statement this afternoon reaffirming their commitments to foster orderly, humane, and regular migration. Delegates from both countries plan to meet again in January in Washington, D.C. Coming up on First at 4, it could take a couple more years before the next leap for mankind. Officials say the next moon landing is delayed.
Plus, the forecast turns wintry by tomorrow, timing out those snow chances after this break.